work on them, leave them aside, and just stick with the ones that constituted a violation. So the court said that the support was unconstitutional for three main reasons. The first was the most obvious violation to the Neutrality Declaration. It is, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the nuclear test case, the International Court of Justice said that when recognizing the legal value of unilateral acts, it said that unilateral acts are normally very specific, and that in their contents, that these unilateral obligations are very specific in the way they are framed and phrased, and how the country then is understood as bound. So the Costa Rica's Neutrality Declaration is a beautiful 7-page long document. And in one of its clauses, it says that it should not give any support of any kind, so it shall not be involved in reality or apparently in a conflict of others. So Costa Rica's neutrality has to be so strict, so it should never even give an impression that is taken aside in a conflict of others.
Yeah.
And here is where the violation to Costa Rica's neutrality happened.
And here, just for everybody listening, it's important to know that, so the 7-page document is the document of 1983 that Costa Rica declared and announced to the world, by the way, from today on, this is our policy. And Costa Rica views this as it's binding on itself. That's why it's a unilateral act, right? It doesn't depend on whether other states recognize it. Costa Rica says, this is my stance, and this is valid on myself, and you picked them up on that and said, so we want to we demand that you stick to your own rules.
Yes, that was somehow the core subject of my master's thesis, to find if there were grounds on international law for such a thing to happen, and I was very much amazed by the discoveries in terms of how many grounds in international law a neutrality declaration like the one Costa Rica issued has. So the first violation was to the neutrality obligation.
Mm-hmm.
The second violation is a consequence of the first, because it's a violation to the obligation to respect international obligations. And the third one is because the court said that Costa Rica cannot support any action taken outside the scope and control of the Security Council. So because the invasion of Iraq had not been authorized in Resolution 1441, then Costa Rica was not able to support that action without violating its obligation under the charter. So the court found that Costa Rica, by supporting the coalition of the willing, was in violation of the charter itself.
This is beautiful, because it means Costa Rica Supreme Court found that any country part of the UN Charter was in breach. That would be a logical consequence. But congratulations to your Supreme Court. That's a fantastic Supreme Court.
It was, yes, it was a fantastic Supreme Court. And yeah, I mean, now that I have, well, I'm older and I have studied much further on the issue. I wish the court would have, well, it's not made of experts in international law. It was a very, very rare case, because it's normally tackling constitutionality issues not grounded on international law, right? But at least oh, and then the court did something, which was that we have a mixed constitutional system. It's a written constitution, but we also have a non-written constitution, right? And this written constitution evolves through the rulings of the Constitutional Supreme Court. the court said that the neutrality declaration or the neutrality obligations had to be understood as incorporated as a part of the non-written constitutional system in Costa Rica. So they basically, I
Elevate.
don't know if upgraded the neutrality declaration, but they did incorporated it in the constitution. So by the time the Congress passed the law on neutrality, it wasn't really necessary because it was already a part of the constitution.
When did Congress pass this law?
Um, it was not long ago. Let me check it real quick. In 2014, when they issued the law recognizing the right to peace. And as we spoke before, in Costa Rica, we understand neutrality as a part of a broader foreign policy, which is the peace policy. So that's why it's included in the right to peace law.
That is very interesting. So it was the Supreme Court that elevated the foreign policy to having constitutional force, and later the Congress also made a law about this. So it's also in the legal code, but in a sense, I mean, the Constitution, of course, is on a higher level, but that just means it's baked in very, very tightly. And for you in 2004, this meant that you could force. I mean, once this decision was out, then the president was forced to withdraw that statement of support. Or what happened exactly after the verdict came out?
Yeah, it is exactly as you mentioned. It was very uh it was very simple, and then it came out on the news. I mean, it was everywhere in the news, even in the United States. It came out on the news, big. It was on the main media. The Costa Rican Ministry of Foreign Affairs sent a note saying to the Colin Powell, the Secretary of State at the time, that well, we have this ruling, so we have to withdraw. And next day, I I received the fax at my house from Colin Powell
What?
saying that Costa Rica was now out of the list of the coalition of the willing. And I mean, I'm just very sorry I never got a photocopy because faxes, as you know, they erase with time. But it was a little bit surreal for me at 24 years old just to get a fax from Colin Powell to my house saying you're out of the coalition of the willing.
So because you were the plaintiff, you're the one who forced the case. So Powell actually then notified the plaintiff. That's interesting that they did that.
Yeah, I mean, they of course they notified the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the court and everything, but I mean, there was no need to send me that fax. It's just a very fun anecdote that I got that one.
Congratulations.
But yeah, but it was very, very easy. I mean, it took maybe 3 days after the ruling came out to have Costa Rica out of the list of the coalition of the willing.
But you know, this really shows also the force that the law can have and how it escalates up if done correctly. So this is well, that was a great achievement, and you struck your own country out of that list. That was, I think that matters. That-
Yeah. I mean, especially if you take into consideration the record that the Americans have on abiding to, international obligations, that they don't really have a very good record, and they could have not cared much, but the fact that they did kind of says something. It says something. Costa Rica is not a big, powerful country.